Hey everyone, History Mystery Man here, coming to you today from the home office. Here today to share a really interesting story with you, how my tugboat captain career got started. True story, interesting story, and I think you'll enjoy it. We'll get to that in just a moment. Beforehand, I wanted to clear up a few things regarding the Edmund Fitzgerald. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage this 24 and 2025 season with everyone's favorite Captain Darrell Walton. So much props for him. And of course, the new series with Captain Michael Capser, and introducing Keith Baker as well, the wheelsman on the Arthur M. Anderson, who's now serving as a wheelsman on the Gott, the Edwin Gott. We look forward to getting Keith Baker back on the show. Have this little piece of rope, or line as it's referred to on a boat. If that little piece of rope could talk, we'd know what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald, because that little piece of rope was there. This is a piece of rope from one of the lifeboats on the Fitzgerald, given to me by Captain Darrell. But I did want to clear up a couple things, first of which would be hatch covers. You may recall a couple of years ago, Darrell first brought to my attention, and probably to yours, that the hatch covers on the Edmund Fitzgerald could not be entirely fastened down because some were warped. And then what happened a year later, a deckhand, Donald Evans. So if you're watching, Donald, I hope you are, Donald Evans reached out to us and told us about those warped hatch covers. He was a deckhand on the Fitzgerald in 1974. In fact, we have photographic evidence. There's a picture that shows a corner on, I think it's number 3 hatch, lifted up, peeled up from the coaming. So we know they were warped to some level. Were they warped enough to let in enough water to bring down the Fitzgerald? I don't know, and I'm not going to solve that here. In fact, I'm going to read a little excerpt from Donald Evans, what he wrote to us. Quote, "The clamps on the Fitz were so out of adjustment that the deck movement in heavy weather, or certainly any wave washing over the hatch, would knock many down. I remember putting clamps on that were a little tighter than the previous ones I put on, and many of the previous would then fall off. I also remember standing on the hatches and bouncing on them and having clamps falling down all around me." So that comes from Donald Evans, a deckhand on the Edmund Fitzgerald. But I just wanted you to know, Donald, that I believe you. I believe those hatch covers were indeed warped. How badly? I don't know. And then the subject, did the Edmund Fitzgerald go aground? Some certainly believe it did, some don't. It's opinion, yours, mine, his, hers. I'm on the side that believes it did go aground. And if it didn't go aground, it was certainly failing structurally from beneath. Call it a loose keel, call it coming apart in the rough seas, whatever it was. It either went aground or it was coming apart structurally, and or both. Now, we get a lot of people that claim that it couldn't have gone aground because there are no markings on the stern portion that's laying upside down that we can visibly see. There are no marks on there that would suggest it went aground. So that's the reason for why it didn't go aground. But you can believe it did go aground or it didn't go aground, but you can't use that as the reason because there's no marks on the stern. And that's because there is literally 200 feet from the middle, completely missing, disintegrated, that we can no longer really investigate. If there was a grounding, it probably happened there where the break was, where it disintegrated. So, and of course, the bow is planted right side up, planted in the mud, and we don't know what's going on underneath the bow. So whether it went aground or it didn't go aground, that's a matter of opinion. I get it. But we can't say it didn't go aground because there are no markings on the stern. And that just makes no sense to me because we can't see the 200 feet that's missing, and we can't see what's under the bow. What we can see in the bow, starboard bow, there's a big hole. What caused that hole? I don't know. Something either came against the bow from inside, or something came against the bow from the outside. But there's a big hole in the starboard bow. I wanted to put that out there. We can let you chew on that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be grateful to get them. I appreciate all the comments. I try and respond to every comment, but they're important to me, and I want them to know that they're important to me. which is why I respond to each and every one of you, and I spend hours doing it. Back to the story of how I became a tugboat captain. Okay, so I started on the tugs, my first tug was the Mary Page Hanna from Hanna Marine Corporation. They're big 150-foot lake tugs, and we towed oil barges all over the Great Lakes. I traveled the Great Lakes from one end to the other as a deckhand, and I started right out of high school when I was 18 years old. I soon made my way to the James A. Hanna, where I spent most of my time as a deckhand. By the time I was 20, I actually had, since I started so early, I had enough sea time where I could sit and write for a captain's license. Then they called it towboat operator. I eventually moved on and got my master's license for the Great Lakes, or inland waters of the United States, I should say, including the Great Lakes. I went to a seamanship school in Piney Point, Maryland, right on the Chesapeake Bay. It was beautiful. It was the Harry Lundeberg School of Seamanship. And when I got my license, there were, I think, about 30 men in the class. I was the youngest. There were 3 of the 30 that made it through on the first round. It's a 12-hour exam. You got to do navigation. You chart your way across the chart. You have rules of the road. You have a general section where they can ask you anything, and a safety section. And you have to get 90% or better on the first 2, navigation and rules of the road. Then the back 2, you could squeeze by with 70% or better. But I got through on the first round. I studied super hard. I'm not the smartest person in the room. I never was. I never will be. But I do apply myself in a big way when I put my mind to something, and I was determined to not fail this test. And I was proud of that, because when I received my license, I was just 21 years and 6 days old. I think that's the youngest tug captain in the history of the Great Lakes. And I went back to the tug right away, because the tugs I was on, we worked all winter. We broke ice in the winter. So I'm here to tell you that the gales of November are indeed nasty. They ain't no better in January, February, or March either. Trust me on that. But anyway, I come back to the tug right away. I think it was in February, and I had my license, and I think about a year went by. People kept asking me, why don't you use it? What are you being a deckhand for? And I said, I don't know. Be honest with you, I just didn't have the confidence that I could do it. I had never touched a control on a boat in my life. I paddled a canoe once. I did that. But I never drove a boat. I had the license, so proud, but I really didn't think in my mind I was ever going to use it. But I had it, and you couldn't take it away. You know, it's kind of like a degree on the wall. But anyway, I eventually made my way to Ludke Engineering Company out of Ludington, Michigan. And we were building I got into some marine construction. We were building a break wall. I don't know, somewhere over by Conneaut. I can't remember exactly the port. But we were building a break wall. You know, I got these barges and big boulders in them that you'd crane off and drop down, and I was a deckhand on I think it was the Chris E. Ludke, named after the owner's son, Chris. And I made a terrible mistake. I wanted to literally jump off a cliff. You know, we were towing a stone barge, and you know, we're just pulling it by like a 2.5-inch nylon rope off the stern. You know, as the barge is coming in, the deckhand's got to be back there pulling up the rope, you know, and securing everything. And I was doing that. But then the captain shoved the tug in reverse and backed on it real hard. And I didn't know he was going to be backing on it at that time. They literally would back into these barges with the stern in full reverse to stop the barge while you're towing it. It's insane, but that's how we did it. But he backed on it, and I didn't realize he was backing on it. And I didn't pull up the rope from the stern in time, and he backed, and that prop went reverse the other way. It sucked the rope down into the prop and wrapped into the prop and almost took me with it. The motor seized right there. The prop couldn't turn. We were dead in the water. Oh my God, you want to talk about a lashing I got from the crew? Ho! They called me every effing name in the book. It was the worst deckhand mistake you could ever make, and I felt like that small. So now the boat's seized up, the prop won't turn. They had to have the tug towed back to port because of me. First of all, we lost the whole next day. Do you know how costly that is for a company who operate on thin margins of profit? And the guys are just tearing me a new you-know-what. I had to rent a crane now and bring it down, and the tug was small enough that they could actually lift the ass end of the stern of the tug up out of the water so they could go in and cut that line that was entangled around the shaft and the propeller. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to quit. I said, okay, I'm a screw up. And then the next morning, we worked 12-hour shifts. The next morning, I'm there at 6 o'clock in the morning to see what's going to happen. And guess who's there? Chris E. Ludke. He's the owner's son. So when I saw him there, I thought to myself, okay, this is it. I'm getting fired. And this is going to be so embarrassing to my stepfather, who was a tug captain and eventually a Great Lakes pilot, who worked so hard and stuck his neck out to get me the job. I was going to be humiliated. I knew I was going to get fired. You know, why else would the port captain come to town? Anyway, I'm getting there. Don't you worry. I had to suck it up, and I walked up to the tug, and he looked at me and he said, "You ready to operate this thing?" I said, "Excuse me?" "Operate the tug. You have your license, don't you?" Yes, sir, I do." He said, can you run this outfit?" "I don't know. I've never done it. I'm just a kid." He goes, "Well, here's the deal. Our regular captain," anyway, he got so drunk the night before that they couldn't wake him up. So he looks at me and says, "We need a captain and we need you to run this thing. Can you do it?" And eventually I said, "I'll sure try, sir." But I was so damn scared. It was interesting, though, because the whole crew, the foreman on the job and the deckhands and the engineers and whoever was there, no respect for me at all. But my respectometer kind of changed overnight when all of a sudden I went from the guy that screwed everything up to the captain on the tug. And when I towed that first barge, I had to tow a barge out into Lake Erie. I had to land it alongside another barge. I'll be damned, I landed that thing perfectly. You could have put an eggshell between it. And all those men are just standing there looking. And I thought, yeah. And by God, I had earned a little more respect. And one thing led to the next, and I kept doing it. I did dredging jobs and more construction jobs. And one time we built a lighthouse out in the lake. I towed 3 barges once to the St. Lawrence Seaway where we dredged all winter. I did a lot of things like that. Didn't do much harbor towing with the ships, but I did a lot of lake towing with the barges. But there's a picture. There was a newspaper guy down there that came down to see the crane and the tug. So embarrassing. He took our picture. I'll show you the picture. But you can see the look on my face. I'm not a happy camper. I'm embarrassed, but by God, the next day, I was the captain on that tugboat, and I was never so damn proud of myself. Of all the things I've done, I'm not saying it's a lot, but whatever I've done in this old crazy world, that's what I'm most proud of, my tenure as a merchant marine on the Great Lakes. Anyway, that's how I became a tugboat captain. Hope you enjoyed the story, and I look forward to seeing you soon. For the Mystery Man, I'm Don Radeball. See ya.